In this module, we're going to have a look at Daniel Ofman. And Daniel, you can see on the screen there in the picture, and he has an approach to human behaviour that he refers to as the core quadrant. And the core qualities are 4 of these core quadrants, all with different names. And that's what we're going to have a look at in this module. And the 4 quadrants that we're concerned with are identified as the core quality, the pitfall, the allergy, and the challenge. Now, the core quality is always positive, and it's something that each of us have. We all have more than one, so that's a good news for us. But if we overdo that core quality, very often what we can do is fall into a pit. And that's no different to any other behavioural scientists that have actually come up with this theory. Meredith Belbin, for example, very often talks about a weakness being an overdone strength, and it's particularly good if you've got to give feedback in that area. The beauty of this model is that it's more 3D than some of the other models you're likely to come across, because if you can overdo something and fall into a pit, it's understandable that you can actually underdo something, and you then have what Daniel refers to as an allergic reaction, and that's represented by the blue allergy box that you can see on the screen. Now, if we can successfully in our interactions navigate between the allergy and the pitfall so we can then remain true to the core quality, then that's going to make us much more effective. So the question is, how do we do that? And that's what the challenge represents. So we're going to have a look at this from the point of view of working through the model. You can actually start any way you like with the model, which is another beautiful thing about it, is that it's not particularly designed around strength finding. It's not designed around eliminating weaknesses. It basically, you can use it wherever you wish. It's very good with individuals. It's also very good with teams, as I'll go on to mention later on. And I think, if you get into the coaching side of using the theory of core qualities, it can really bring great benefits to your practice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the core quality, and I'm going to take each of these boxes and break them down as we look at them. So on the screen now, you can see the core quality in the bottom right hand side of the screen. And then I've color coded 3 boxes, one in a kind of lime green, pale lime green, one in a pink and one in a blue. And it represents different aspects. So in one case, the pink, for example, my opinion about me. The green is my opinion about others. And the blue is others' opinions of me. So the core quality that I'm going to put forward for myself on this particular one is neat and tidy. Now, I know that's 3 words, and we kind of like to condense this down to 1 word, but neat and tidy is a pretty good example. Now, it's what I take for granted in myself. I just naturally am neat and tidy, and I don't really give it a second thought. That does flag up a bit of an issue, is that you might not be best placed to identify your own core qualities. So feel about asking around, see how you get on with that. But from my point of view, I'm neat and tidy. Now, generally speaking, most of the people I actually work with actually appreciate that in me. But here's what I didn't realise until I started working with this model. Subliminally and kind of under the radar, I actually encourage and demand this in others. So if I'm working around the house, for example, and there's a bit of a mess around, while I'm talking to other people, I'll start to tidy up. And even when my son was growing up in his teenage years, he would have this floor-drobe in his bedroom where nothing would get hung up in the closet until the floor-drobe was full. So I would go in and I would talk to him about football, or I would talk to him about basketball, NBA, or anything like that. And in the process of that conversation, I would start picking stuff up and either putting it in the laundry basket in the vain hope that he might catch on and think, that's a really good idea, I'm going to have a go at this tidying up lark. Didn't quite work out that way, but you can see my point is that I actually really tried to encourage that behaviour in him. So that's my core quality. Now, if we move on to overdoing that, to the pitfall, now, I would go to any lengths in the pink quadrant here. I would go to any lengths to actually justify why working neat and tidy is so much better in terms of being less stressful, in terms of knowing where things are, in terms of making it, tedious for my job and my activities. And you can see even now, although I'm actually recording a video, I'm justifying why neat and tidy is best. However, If we were to talk to my daughter, Katrina, she would say, Dad, that's not neat and tidy, that's OCD. Now, I'm not making light, obviously, of OCD. It's a very serious illness, but you get the point here is that she's saying, Dad, you've taken that too far. So there she's blaming this on me and saying, look, actually, Dad, you've got to cut back on this a bit. Now, interestingly enough, if I'm working with somebody that's meticulous in terms of how they clean things up and they're neat and tidy and everything else, even if the quality of the job that they're doing is not that great, because they're neat and tidy with it, I'll overlook that. I'll cut them some slack. So that's a one to consider there, in terms of how that actually works. So for me, it would be neat and tidy as the core quality. Pitfall would be OCD. Now, if we go on to the allergy is something that I actually loathe in myself if I find that happening. So let's say, for example, I'm doing a job and I run out of time, get the job finished, but I don't get time to tidy up. That's the bit that actually bugs me. And it really gets me. I think to myself, how could I not have realised that it would take this long to actually do this? I should have left more time to finish it off and so on and so forth. And even many years ago, once again, I was working on my son's car when he was a teenager, and somebody had actually bumped into the back and had replaced the rear bumper, etc., and sprayed it. And he, being a teenager, wanted his car back as quick as possible, so I rushed putting the rear number plate on. And the long and the short of it was that it wasn't exactly straight, and every time I left the house and looked at the back of that car, it was like, it was really, really bugging me. Needless to say, I did get around to actually straightening it up while he was not around, so I did manage to sort it out. However, there you go, just finishing the job off. Now, Katrina, my wife, would actually say, actually, look at it, look at the finish you've got on the bumper, that's perfect. That's not an issue, you just got to put it into perspective a bit. But this is not necessarily a good thing for a coach. If we look at that wee sort of pale lime green box there, if I think that somebody else can actually do a job and be neat and tidy with it, and they're not, then it riles me. And that's not good for a coach's point of view. I'm not supposed to be, judgmental. I'm not supposed to be subjective in terms of this. I'm supposed to remain arbitrary to what's going on. So I need to be aware of that. So that's another reason why this model is particularly good for self-development. So I would say the word that actually riles me in terms of this would be shoddy. So now what we've got is a core quality of neat and tidy. We've got OCD as the pitfall, and we've got shoddy as the allergy. So that leaves us with the challenge. Now this is a big missing in me in this particular model. So what is it that I'm missing? What do I need to do to actually make sure neat and tidy stays neat and tidy, stays in perspective, doesn't go over the top? What is it that I need to do? Now, interestingly enough, if we look at that lime green box again, you can see that actually I admire in others. So I've actually seen it somewhere, but I'm not drawing on what I've seen. And the other thing is what others wish I had. So certainly my wife actually wishes that I wasn't so kind of pedantic about these things in particular and meticulous, it's like, and it's almost like if to use another kind of analogy here, if you're a perfectionist in the workplace, and we coach a lot of people that have got that kind of trait, then it's an appreciation that good is good enough. We're not looking for perfection, we're looking for good is good enough, because we've got to balance quality, cost and time, that old project triangle there. So for me, in terms of what do I need to do to make sure neat and tidy remains neat and tidy, doesn't become OCD, and it's not shoddy. And what I really need, my background is in engineering, so words like measurement, words like balance, words like calibrate, all of these kind of words actually resonate with me. And that's an interesting point, because this model is brilliant if you're working in an organisation where there's resonant leadership. That technique where you're using the right type of language so it resonates with people and they get the buy-in, they get the engagement, they get the ownership. All of those kind of things will actually work. So that's pretty much how that works through with that. Now, if we take that on and look at probably what is one of the most busiest slides I've ever produced, I've taken those 4 boxes, as you can see, core quality, pitfall, allergy and challenge. And if we take my example again, so it's the previous 4 slides basically merged into one. So if we take my example again of the core quality, and then the peach coloured box in the top middle, too much of that, OCD, that's my pitfall. Too little of that, peach colour on the left hand side, that then becomes my allergy, which is shoddy. So shoddy, a moderate increase, would actually give me a much more balanced approach in terms of the challenge. It would give me a more calibrated approach. The word I would use is probably balance, in fairness. However, if I was OCD, but I was more balanced about it, which is much more of a positive approach to, having that kind of obsession with something, it's a positive opposite to it, it's a balance to it. If I'm more balanced, I'm far more likely to actually keep the core quality going. And that's the key component with that. And that's how it wants to work. Now, interestingly enough, what we also have is a list of words on previous courses that I've actually worked on. And those list of words are very, very useful in terms of how I've actually worked it through with people. But what I generally tend to do is that if I'm working on a one-to-one, I can use this, and as I say, I can start anywhere. The person might have had a bit of feedback in a recent appraisal, and it's negative, and therefore it's a pitfall. So we start with that. We back it up, work out the core quality, we play around with it and figure out what the allergy is. It's a really good construct for holding a conversation in a positive nature. The other one that I find quite useful is you will get that awful question that you get at interviews where somebody says, okay, so tell me, if you were to improve one thing about yourself, what would that be? Now, if you've worked through this model beforehand, you know what you would like to improve on yourself because it's a pitfall. But you could say to them, actually, that's interesting because I've done a bit of work on this. And my pitfall is that, I'm really obsessive about quality, which, over the top sometimes can blow a budget or something like that. However, actually knowing that I need to balance that particular approach has helped with me, and it means that I can actually make sure that I'm more quality conscious as I'm actually working through things, as I'm trying to be a perfectionist with it. Now that's a much better answer to give at an interview, and it's a fair chance you'll walk out thinking, I gave a good account of myself in there, as opposed to normally you go out and think, I let myself down on that question, why did I not see that one coming? So it's a really good way of actually working through it. If I'm working with a group, what I'll do is, if I'm working face to face, I'll stand with a flip chart and I put a cross on the flip chart representing the 4 quadrants. And then what I'll do is I'll ask for a volunteer, and I'll literally get the volunteer to tell me what the core quality is. And they tell the rest of the group, obviously, as well. And what then happens is I then get them to give a little bit of context about that, how that works, what it is that their core quality is, etc., and how they've actually come about it. And you get general nods and that. And then what I do is I say, right, where do you want to go? Asking the volunteer, where do you want to go next? Do you want to go pitfall, allergy, or challenge? And I'm doing that to demonstrate that you can start anywhere you like with this. Most people actually, in fairness, say I'd like to go for the pitfall. So what I do is I then say to them, have you got a pitfall in mind? Keep it to yourself at the moment, but have you got a pitfall in mind that you can think of? And it doesn't matter whether they say yes or no, because they're keeping it to themselves anyway. What I then do is I then remove the person from the conversation, and I say, right, okay, my volunteer, who for the purpose of this exercise we're going to call Jeff, actually is going to sit just to one side. And what I do is I say, right, you've got Jeff's core quality up on the board. And in this particular aspect of it, what we're going to do is we're going to say that Jeff's core quality is decisive. So it's a good positive core quality there, decisive. And what we do is we say to people in the room, right, forget Jeff for the moment, just have a look at the word decisive. And if you overdo that word, what does that become? In your lexicon, in your vocabulary, what word would you use to describe someone that actually overdoes that decisiveness? And you get words like, dogmatic. You get words like forceful. You get words like bullying even. You get all of these words coming up. And we don't write any of them down. We just sort of let them bounce around. And then once I've got 5 or 6, what I do is I say to the group, right, just hold it there. I then say to Jeff, any of these that actually resonate with you, ring a bell? Or do you want to stick with the one that you thought of? And usually, they'll come up with something. Sometimes they'll pick one from the room. Sometimes it'll be their own one. And it really doesn't matter. So, for example, in this particular case, decisive is the core quality. And they've gone for the word dogmatic. That's fine. So we put that up there, and usually there's a little bit of a story behind it. They say, I've been accused of that before, or yeah, that came up in an appraisal once or so, and they share that with the rest of the room, and that's fine. But sometimes they don't. It doesn't really matter at this stage. And then what we do is that, right, where next? Typically, they usually say the allergy. So in terms of that, we say to other people, right, just have you got an allergy in mind, Jeff? Keep it to yourself at the moment, and that's it. We remove them from the equation. We throw the word over to the room again, and what we do is we actually say, okay, if you've got decisiveness as a core quality, what would you say is not enough of that word? And so usually we get somebody will actually say indecisiveness, and we try and avoid the ins and the uns pure as prefixes, purely because what we're trying to do is generate a conversation, and it's so easy to say decisiveness, indecisiveness. So we want another word, and we're trying to generate conversation within the group. Okay, so it might be somebody might say woolly, just as a little bit sort of not very sort of fixed on things. Some people might say scatty. Some people might say, kind of airy-fairy type thing, just like I'm in and are in and all this kind of stuff. Somebody might say, any of these words might come up. Once again, once we get half a dozen, what we'll do is we'll actually then throw it back to Jeff and say, Jeff, you heard any of these words that actually ring a bell, or is there something else that you're looking at here? And Jeff will say, the word that sticks in my mind, which I think I'm going to go with, is hesitant. Ah, right, okay. So let's just check this allergy out then, because if hesitant really is an allergy, then if you see it in somebody else, it really grates, it bugs the living daylights out of you. If you find yourself being hesitant for yourself, for your own reasons, not for any particular thing that you've done, but it's just the way that things have manifested themselves, then it will bug you as well. So is hesitant still the right word? Oh, yeah. I really don't like people that are in a leadership role and that are hesitant when they should be making a decision. Okay, that's fine. And usually you can see these behaviours being played out in the group work. So then what we do is we put hesitant up there. So we've got core quality of decisive, we've got pitfall of dogmatic, we've got hesitant as an allergy. And then what we do is we say, right, what's the challenge? What is the challenge that we're actually looking at here? And typically, the rest of the group, similarly, we move Jeff out the equation, get the rest of the group to actually chip in their words of what they think it could be. How does a person remain decisive? So they might use words like informed. They might use words like engaged. Any of these kind of things. But once again, get yourself half a dozen words, throw it back to Jeff and say, right, Jeff, what's the word that you want to go with? And they might say, actually, I quite like informed, so I think we'll stick that one up there. That's good. It's better than the one I was thinking of, so we'll put the one up there. So that's great. So now we've got the 4 quadrants on the board. And what I've been the person that's facilitating that. What I'll then do is that I'll then actually sit down and Jeff will come up and take the board and we'll get another volunteer. And I go and sit in Jeff's place. And when Jeff goes through that exercise like I did, they sit in the place of the volunteer that is now coming up to the board. So they don't go back to their own place. We keep that kind of edge of discomfort in the room, okay? Just purely because, we want people to actually be on point with this, and we want people to actually be focused. We want people to be mindful. And it's a great way of actually working through with people, what the strengths are and how we can actually help each other in the respective groups. So over the years, I've managed to collect a number of core qualities, pitfalls, allergies and challenges, and I've actually got them on a list in terms of that. And what I can do is, if you want to drop me an email to peter@cfmconsulting.net, what I'll do is I'll actually send that list out to you. It's not to say that list is absolute. It just gives you a list of words that you can actually almost pop in to see if the people actually use them as bait, if you like, to see if people actually rise to it. And that ultimately is how we use Daniel Ofmans' theory of core qualities. A very good model, works well in coaching, works well in mentoring, works particularly well in supervision. But it's one that I think in the world of work we can actually get a lot more benefit from. And it's one that I've used extensively. Thank you for watching and listening and engaging.